Hi, so I'm going to share some breathing stuff that I've been working on the past couple of months. It's kind of going to be on how to integrate different exercises that require breathing, so that you can take strengths from one activity and then that requires breathing, and then apply that strength or what you develop in that activity to all the other activities that you do which require breath. So in theory, this is a pretty good cure for things like tennis elbow. But it should also work for the improvement or the restoration of anything that relies on your breathing. So the first thing that you do is, people do exercises of various sorts, and then those exercises are thought to cause something to the body. Like, you do an exercise and then that creates some sort of force in the body, and then that force is thought to cause the body to improve or to become better. So with these breathing exercises, instead of doing an activity to cause something to the body and then have that something make the body better, you start to do or create or promote the force directly that causes the betterment. You get into any position that causes the betterment on this side, and then that makes the body improve, rather than doing the positions on that side which cause the force which make the body sort of improve. And then this is different from the sort of other approach, which is to use outside forces on yourself. Right, so doing an exercise is like still using an internal force, but you're using a technique. But then to use like pills or surgery or drugs, that's imposing a better state on the body, and so it's kind of coming from the imagination or the idea of improvement. Like, oh, I want my back's hurting, so if I use the idea of what improvement is, I could get surgery or take pain medications which cause this sensation to go away, which I think is good. But that's just the idea. Like, it might not be good for that sensation to go away in terms of like the total stability of the whole system, right? Which is why it's like, I used opioids to deal with the pain, but then all of a sudden, 10 years down the road, is it better? And it's like, no, that's because it was just the idea of improvement. So with breathing, we're like right in between those 2 points of using a personal manual self-improvement technique, such as exercising or meditation or learning like facts, like any of those techniques that we do to make ourselves better. Breathing observes kind of what techniques cause what, and then when you're doing it in terms of breathing, you start to become the cause of the betterment, instead of doing the technique. And those two are radically different things if you think about it, even though they're like, when you're doing a technique correctly, it's creating a force on the body Like it could be a squat. Like I'm creating a particular type of force in my nervous system, on the bones, depending on my posture. And those different forces cause my body to grow or respond or develop if I was to spend a lot of time in them. So to work at breathing, it's like, well, what was that force? Instead of getting into the posture, how do I generate that force directly with my intent that caused the helpful adaptation in the body? And so that's kind of like the first little gate of orientation, of looking for that, which on one level that's like a little bit better alignment posturally. Like if you're trying to do the desired force, and then you're like actually helping along the situation, because that force has to happen to accomplish the technique, right? Like there's a particular pattern of forces that need to happen to accomplish this technique that are just almost happening automatically. So if I were wanting to like make this position stronger or heal it, I would feel in my body like what's happening, and then try and just do it by the sort of feel of it. So that's one skill that we're doing, right? So then with breathing, you can sit still and kind of not focus on anything else, and basically to feel what I'm talking about better. Like even if you have a high level of like, maybe what I said was like total gibberish, but to make it seem to like make more sense in that like meditative way, it's like all you have to do is like shut down or silence the system, so that like it gets quiet. And when it gets quiet, you'll start to automatically see actual real patterns, and you'll be able to communicate them or express them, but they're real patterns that are actually there. And if you express them to somebody or somebody expresses them to you, you can't express them in their totality. And so it kind of works, but the more complicated it gets, the less the spoken verbal expression like actually helps in this terrain of betterment. So the only really the only skill that you can have is from like dialogue with somebody who's actually seeing the same patterns as you are, so that your speech means the same thing. It's like, oh, I've both felt or I've seen or I've experienced this directly. Like, so it's like if you know that the green cup is there and you're seeing it, when I say green cup, it's like we both are using this incomplete word green cup, but it's like it's the fullness of the green cup that we're referring to, where it's like if I'm like saying imagine a red cup here, those imaginations are going to be referencing themselves or their imagination, so it's going to be like a totally different thing than the actual green cup label in terms of its functioning. And so the only thing that would let you see like the real red cup, if it was actually here and you just couldn't see it, is like to quiet it down. So there's this like suppression thing that has to happen for like any of the stuff to come out, and then that's the only real skill, because if you're seeing the same thing as people, you're kind of on a communicative playing field of sorts that's like real. There's like actual real language, and then the only way to learn language is by listening. So it's there's some value of dialogue between different levels of like pattern recognition. I don't know, and you can just observe that, contemplate that about what's happening when people have different levels of pattern recognition and they're engaging with each other socially, financially, relationally. So there's like different tiers of people in the world that can see this type of skill. Like we're all at kind of a different level. Like kids are super high at what I'll talk about, but like within the family socio-structure, you know, you can see the implications of this. The so the ability to quiet is like you're calming the breath down. So like if you're just doing that sitting still, it might not make sense, even though that's the best kind of like without you focus on that. So you're kind of suppressing yourself in this like suffocating way that's similar to like, you know, doing an exertion, like running, and then limiting your oxygen supply intentionally, not through like, I can't breathe, but you're sitting there and like with your mental self-control, you know, you're running really fast and only breathing through your nose. So there's this like demand for the system to do more with less than what it's wanting. And it's like wanting that, so like the system's wanting to excite to that like level that it would get if it was like fed more oxygen. But as you like restrain it, it's like that's actually suppressing the excitement in the body, and so that's actually relaxation, which is like quietness. So if you're really noisy, or if this is like a totally new skill, like meditation for people who suck at meditation is actually an incredibly dynamic activity. Because it's like if you're running in place really fast, it's easier to kind of practice breath control because it's happening naturally. Or like if you're running as hard as you can on your air supply and you cut it back at all, you can actually feel for a long period of time that you're suppressing yourself or your activity by like trying to make by driving the activity up. You can feel the pressure on your suppression or your relaxation strength. And so if this relaxation muscle is really weak, and it is in most people like myself, like if you're prone to tension, the relaxation like intent is really weak, so it's found more easily with like aerobic or moving stuff or strength stuff or anything like an activity that is more noisy than you normally are, allows your relaxation response to kind of like hit it or suppress it more easily. So it's like you can do the activity and you can run for 40 minutes with breath control and generate the same level of quieting as somebody who's kind of like who's stronger just sitting on the cushion doing it. The physical activity, it kind of becomes like a leverage or a force multiplier when normally it would like get in the way. Like if you look at like what is going on in terms of the quieting, the main skill is just quieting. And so at first it's easier to quiet a loud thing. So this quieting is everything from like the big one is not talking about, is a lot of stuff that makes a lot of noise, but then you're just noticing that it's a skill. It's not like a particular state, because somebody who knows how to be absolutely quiet can like spontaneously violate all the rules of like noisiness, and since they know how to be quiet, they don't have to like cultivate stillness, they just like stop. So so to see how we're weaving the thread of the breath between things, you can use the contemplation of the thinking about what the breath is, and it's kind of like the force of the energy going into the body, and realizing that the breath can kind of go into the body in the way that causes a healthy change. And to kind of like not hallucinate that the techniques are doing it. The techniques are causing the force, but so is every other force in the world. So you do a technique, and then that combines with like every other force in existence. And if you get the correct energy, the technique does it correctly. And then to hear more and perceive more, it lets your language become more powerful, so your study becomes more powerful, your conceptualization becomes more powerful. But that only happens if you can actually see new perceptions, and that only happens via the ability to be quiet, so that your receiving picks up enough. So that requires learning how to be actually quiet. And there's some stuff that stimulates the effects of being quiet, like psychedelics and stuff like that. It's like you can see more on those things the same way that painkillers take pain away, but it has the same kind of downstream effects long term if overused as painkillers and opioids. It blocks the pain, so suddenly I'm open. So with psychedelics, it's it quiets the mind, so suddenly my internal vision amps up. But that mind quieting in that way, so that the internal vision is amplified, has similar repercussions to opioids in terms of the effect on the physical body, or the listening to the physical body. So that type of stuff actually causes an inability to listen to the area that it's suppressing. So it's causing quietness by not listening, by causing a huge noise, or not listening in another area. So you have to figure out the suppression thing, which you would want to do while you're not making a bunch of extra noise, right? Because it's the more that I move, the more that I can't see because of the movement. So ideally, I would want to learn to do the suppression thing or the relaxation thing while I'm not moving, or while I'm doing a simple activity or whatever. But if I'm weak at that, and we're looking for the energy, so we're looking of the energy of relaxation, of what kind of alignment am I looking for that generates relaxation, and it's just as elusive and hard to teach as what am I doing when I'm moving? What am I doing when I'm causing activity? What am I doing when I'm causing activity? Nobody has to explain it. It's kind of a no duh. So then to feel that or conceptualize that or anything more, it's you have to become more quiet so that your perception amps up. And then with greater perception, you're going to see something. And that vision isn't always visual. You'll spot other patterns, that happen over the time scale of days, and patterns between different interactions of different things. You have no idea what the perception of the pattern will pick up, but you'll just see it. And that comes from quietness, the same way that noise comes from silence. So it's the quieter you can be, the better. So what's the quiet button? If this is noise and the noise causes the activity, what's quiet? Because it's not just sitting still. So it's easiest to find when you're you have the intent to amp up this activity to this different level, and then you suppress it. So you're on the running's kind of generating a wave. I'm kind of tired. I'm running at a rate that I want, a particular amount of air, and then instead of giving myself that much air, how fast can I run while I'm breathing as relaxed as possible? So almost keeping the breath going at the same level while amping up the activity. If you look at the energetics of that inside of what you're doing, that's the suppression of the activity skill in general. So you can do it with the activity that's almost like starting with a lighter suppressive weight, like an inverted weight. And then that general skill can be applied to any situation within which you would want to be picking up or sensing more objects, which is pretty much like all the time. So like you can, as that restriction or as that suppression is going, if you wanted to fix something like tennis elbow, you would first become still, which means apply that pressure that we learned from suppressing an activity like running. Apply that pressure to the self for like 10 or 20 minutes so that it like stills out, and then you can start looking at the area that's like hurting, and you can like run tension through it, like add the tension to it while simultaneously suppressing or quieting, or just being very open and creative to the process, because it's like it's not about the instruction, but like believing that the listening can lead to learning, can lead to a change in the understanding of things like strength, tension, relaxation, like focus, like all sorts of things. And then just in general, being in that like suppressed, relaxed listening state that causes that, it heals pretty much anything I can think of that I've had the motivation to apply it to. It's really about that. It's like the application of this force is like therapeutic on anything anybody would want to apply it to. And so at different stages in your life, or what you like when a kid, when you're born, it's like that upwelling of force and growth is almost like just existing causes that downward relaxation, listening, like just existing is listening when you're born. So like when you learn stuff around then, you tend to learn things in really accurate, for real perceptions and concepts of the things that you do, because your mind is like so open. And then that leads to high levels of skill and functional like learning. And then as people get older, you can stop learning or stop listening, or it can get noisy, and then you'll stop being able to see perceptions that maybe other people can. And some perceptions you can only see because you've seen them so many times. So people that are older can like literally perceive things that younger people can't, because maybe the pattern takes place over 7 years. So to even experience it 4 times, you'd have to be alive for like 30-something years. And then as you get older, your ability in math just continues to go down. So your sense of space and time like sort of fragments and falls apart. 21, 28, 35, yeah, 35, 6, anyway. And then sometimes like getting, the more embodied you get, the less your brain works in math things. Your wrist goes limp because you're so embodied.